There have been a lot of furore. There's been some serious furore over words that were attributed to the Cabinet Secretary for Education, Ezekiel Machogu. And this is with regards to funding of the universities. And yesterday he came out to clarify and said, no. I did not say that the government is going to stop funding universities and sending capitation money to universities. This is what he said yesterday. Nobody is interfering with the money. All the funds for education are being ring-fenced. Nobody ever said that university funds are going to be done away with. Government is supporting universities and will continue to support them through capitation and infrastructural funds. Government will never stop funding universities, he said on Tuesday at the Kiambu Institute of Science and Technology when he officiated a groundbreaking ceremony for a mechatronics workshop. He continued, the government has allocated capitation of 50 billion shillings for university education, 15.8 billion shillings to the Higher Education Loans Board. I also want to assure the public that the government will continue to support university education through regular exchequer support, as well as building their capacity to raise more resources through other revenue streams. Public universities have a cumulative debt of 56.1 billion shillings owed to various entities and individuals. On Saturday, the same CS was on a tour of the Dedan Kimathi University of Technology. He was reported to have said, I am going to move around each and every university in Kenya because a number of our universities are faced with problems, particularly finance. You get them complaining about underfunding, and we are encouraging that they must generate their own revenue because the exchequer, as it is now, isn't going to be able to continue funding more because in Kenya, education takes 25.9% of the national budget. So we have to find other ways of creating and generating revenue for universities, and they have to look for other revenue streams. Okay. If you just think about what he said on Saturday, had he said the government is going to stop funding universities?
He didn't say they will stop. He said the exchequer cannot continue to fund in the way in which it has been.
No, he said the exchequer is not going to be able to continue funding more. So not anymore.
More than it already is.
Yes.
And the demand on the exchequer is for more. Is it?
Yep.
Okay.
The demand is, okay, so now we are heavily in debt. Mm-hmm. We are basically in financial problems. Can we get some more? Mm-hmm. He says, hey, boss, more? 25.9% already comes to universities. Mm-hmm. Right now, the exchequer cannot afford to give you more.
Okay. Now, what did he say yesterday?
He said, nobody is taking away the money that comes to universities. Mm-hmm. That money is ring-fenced. Mm-hmm. It's a percentage, it's a certain amount. It comes to universities that shall continue going to universities.
Okay. This makes sense to me. I think the call here, as is the call on many, is to say, look, you have to start thinking of ways in which you can fund this more, that you would come to the government to say what we have is not enough. Whether it is that we are going to award scholarship, whether it is that there are certain needs that we need to fill in order to keep the university fees low. Because we do know that for the longest time, until we saw about 12 months ago, when we saw this double increase of university fees at public universities, right? Because then there was the University of Nairobi, and then pretty much everybody followed suit. All right. So essentially what he's saying is that you must now start to think of income generating activities that would allow you to cover for this more, because the more, the government just does not have it. The exchequer is not going to be able to fill the gap for the more.
Yeah.
I personally don't see a problem with that.
Should the government... Okay.
I don't see a problem.
Here's the thing. Currently, universities have a problem with just managing their costs.
Thank you very much. Now, is that the exchequer's fault or issue?
Well, to some extent, yeah. They're the ones who are now doing this whole
Okay,
100% transition.
Let us try and think of the universities as entities unto themselves alone, without government,
without the baby, without the big brother,
just
or father.
on its own.
Okay.
So you have been given your 1 talent or your 5 talents, and then you must manage it on your own. Are we saying that these stories that we have heard of remittance of monies towards taxes, of mismanagement at university level, of not being able to do with the money that you have, this mismanagement, to whom will it be attributed? the individual institutions, or are we saying that there is a hand of government in these problems that they have been facing? Because we do know that a number of public institutions, universities, have had this issue. When you want to look at Moy University, Professor Kiyama told us about some of the problems that they had at the University of Nairobi. These issues of management, does it come because there's not enough to go around? They've just not been able to tie enough ribbon around this thing? Or has it then been a management issue? Government is saying, if you need more, we are not going to be able to fund that because we just don't have it.
Think of other ways in which you can raise money.
Which you can raise money. Are there ways in which you can do that? This heavy reliance on government to be able to fulfill every need that you would have as a public institution, do we need to start looking at it as days gone by and start to think of ways in which you can do this for yourself? I do not think that this is something that he's asking that is out of, in another in another galaxy.
And remember what Professor Kiyama then told us, that if we actually now start talking about, so the government has been sending some capitation money for students who are in university and also sending money to the Higher Education Loans Board. If we talk about us actually looking at how much it costs us to train, let's say, a doctor, an engineer, go all the way into somebody who's taking an education course, and the other, if you look at how much it actually costs, if we went to start charging the fees as per the cost, then we'll have an issue. Because that's a conversation that they've started having. Okay, can we now look at how much is it costing us to train a doctor who is in the university doing the Bachelor of Surgery and for 6 years? How much is it costing us? How much has the government been subsidizing?
So can we put that on those who are coming to learn?
Yeah, can we up the fees that we are collecting from people? When they started that, everybody else was up in arms. University should not be that expensive. So what's the catch? How do you balance this thing out? How do the universities balance this thing out? How do they actually get to know, all right, so this is the problem that we are facing. These are the possible areas where we can raise money. One of them is, of course, raising the school fees. So everybody who's coming to the university, you are paying slightly higher than you've been paying. Is it possible? Can we look at, say, this course costs this much. So if you're coming to take this course, this is the fee that you pay. There are other courses that will not cost as much. So those that don't cost much, the fees may not rise by much. Those that cost much, the fees will rise, commensurate with what is expected to actually train somebody. City.
You know, the idea of funding education, the model that we've had for the longest time, worked well because this was an elite process when you had just one university, but the supporting benefit was that you didn't need to necessarily go to university to have a career. When you have a population where the numbers are few and the jobs come a begging, now that was such a long time ago that when you look at the present, it looks like it's a pipe dream and something that actually never happened. So how was the thinking about funding universities and ensuring that they function? How has it evolved? Because universities don't just get money from tuition. Yes, the government gives them money. But what about grants? Do our universities focus on research? Do they, given all the departments we have, you know, this is a pet subject of mine. Well, yes, I see you grinning. Do they focus on training and teaching the students to understand the need to further knowledge by actually conducting research, looking for grants so that you can actually conduct research? Because it is one other way of bringing money into the universities. Now, many universities around the world also get, what you say, endowments. There are people who give them gifts, people who give them money, their foundations, former students, etc., etc., etc. Now, it's not a model that we're unfamiliar with. Look at how the alumni of our secondary schools go about helping their schools. Some of the more prominent schools that have lived or who have been in existence longer benefit because they've had students for a longer time. And because of that, they have students who perhaps are able to garner the resources they have and the under the body of the alumni to do certain things. The idea of generating income is an excellent one, but there has to be a roadmap. And part of it has to be part and parcel of how it is we train and teach our students so that they understand.
You're right, CT, there has to be a roadmap. But if you look at these, if you want to use other universities around the world as examples, the ones you talk of that are research centers, that are training centers, where did they start from? They started from a pool of resources that came from tuition that was charged on students, like what you're talking about. It was an expensive affair, whichever way you want to look at it. Indeed, there was government subsidy for those who could not pay, but the bulk of the resources that most institutions have started with has come from tuition that students have paid.
Yes.
It has.
Yes.
Now, how they managed it thereafter is what either was their success or their downfall. How you manage this pool of resources that you had. Did you take these resources and then find a way to be able to multiply them? Did you make your institution a research center, for example? Did you take this institution and say, what other things can we do? There are universities in this country today who have certain things that others don't have. Are you a technology hub, for example? Are you an agricultural hub? What are you doing with the proceeds that could possibly come from that? And I think these are the things that are being asked. That which you have, how then are you able to multiply it for it to then become something that you can use for the future? The reliance on government funding, unfortunately, has probably become just too heavy. Until, if you ask me, you cannot see the opportunities that lie just in front of your nose. And maybe it is a good thing to remove this pacifier from the mouth. It's going to force you to chew at some point.
Remember, when you talk of student loans, anyone who studied abroad will understand that the bane of most people who actually are students in universities is this thing called student's loan or university loan. You will get it, but you have to pay for it.
Yep.
And you pay for it over a long period of time.
Yep.
Now, we have a system, and unfortunately, that system is government funded and it runs out of money. When it runs out of money, then there's a limit to how much it can actually sponsor. Now, I cannot claim to be an expert in this field, but what I know is this. If the minds are set to finding a solution to this problem, as opposed to wallowing in the miasma of talking about the problems we have, which everyone knows, a solution can be found. And probably solutions have been suggested, but the question is, those who are in the position to actually implement the solution, do they listen? Are they willing to take those solutions to heart? Are they willing to make the moves that will actually bring about the desired change?
It will take quite a bit to get there. Onesmus Mutio is joining us now. He is the National Organizing Secretary of the University's Academic Staff Union. Onesmus, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Thank you very much for joining us. Paul Lesana, you got late. Issues with crossing over in traffic this morning.
Yeah, thank you.
It's good that you're here. Welcome to the hot seat of the Situation Room. You found us, of course, in the middle of this conversation, and you're aware of what's been happening to universities across the country. Yes. In fact, you'd be in a better position to actually tell us, paint for us a picture. How are public universities faring today as we speak financially?
Thank you. I think one of the greatest challenges in the public universities today is the financial crisis. Not almost, all public universities are facing this financial crisis. They are in deep debts, and unfortunately they are sinking into debt every single month because they have financial obligations that they cannot meet, and therefore every month they are still sinking deeper and deeper into the financial crisis. If this is not resolved, then our fear is that we might be forced to close some of the public universities.
What's causing this financial crisis?
Well, I think the underfunding from the government could be the main cause of these financial problems. Now, apparently, the government does not fully fund the universities. The financing model, which is the differentiated unit cost, is being funded at around 40%. The proposal is that it should be the government should fund at least 80% of the differentiated unit cost, so that the internal the finances that the universities generate internally could now meet the 20%. But unfortunately, the government has only been funding 40%. What that means is that the government capitation that comes to the public universities sometimes is only enough to pay the net salary. For example, you might find there are certain university, their monthly wage bill, it could be 100 million. But what they get from the government is 80 million. Now, that means that they can only pay partially the salary. It means, therefore, that they cannot pay statutory deductions like KRA. We have the third-party deductions like the pension components, the bank loans, and the bank deductions that the check of their members take from the banks. And therefore, what they get only goes to pay the net salary of the members. So how do they pay suppliers? How do they pay other parties that needs to be paid? And because of that, then it means every month the universities are sinking into debts. Much to that, there is also what we call the understaffing the universities. The lecturers cannot teach do all the workload, and therefore the universities will survive in what we call the part-time lecturing. So you come, get some classes, you teach and you're paid. But these lecturers are not being paid. In fact, as we speak, I know of some universities that have not paid part-time lecturers since 2018.
Wow.
And therefore you're only coming to teach, but they will not pay at the end of the month. And therefore that also continues to make universities sink into debts every month.
I want us to just get straight into understanding exactly what this, differentiated unit cost is, understanding why is it that universities then, their operating costs have gone so high. Has it always been the same, or can you paint us a picture over the last 30 years? But let's talk about this after we take a quick break. This is The Situation Room. It's Kenya's biggest conversation, reminding you about what we are selling in terms of olive real estate. Naserian Ridge Phase 3, a gated community just 4 kilometers from the SGR substation in Nachu. And we are saying that because you are listening to SpiceFM and you follow Jimmy Gathu live on Saturdays, they're organizing a site visit on the 19th of November to go to this particular piece of land. And if you purchase and say that you actually listened to Jimmy Gathu live and you'd like to make a booking where a 50 by 100 plot is going for 650,000 shillings, you'll get a 20,000 shillings discount. This is The Situation Room. Let's take a quick break. We'll be back shortly with Onesimus Mutio, who is the National Organizing Secretary of the Universities Academic Staff Union, talking about government funding and universities and colleges. What's enough? What more is required? Good morning.
This is The Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Conversation continues with Onesimus Mutio, the National Organizing Secretary of the Universities Academic Staff Union. We are talking about funding universities. The Education CS, Ezekiel Machogu, has clarified. He did not say that the government is going to stop funding universities. He only said that the government will not be able to afford funding, putting more money in addition to what it's currently paying and funding universities. So that's what you were explaining to us where the money goes. There's this thing that you call the differentiated unit cost. Explain easily, and what does it mean, and how does it work out in universities?
Thank you. Well, when you talk about the differentiated unit cost, what we are talking about is what will be the cost of training a certain field. So if we are offering a certain course, we want to look at how much is it going to cost to train that specific person in that field, in terms of the resources, paying the money that is going to pay the trainers, that is the lecturers, the resources that are required. You realize that it will cost differently training, teaching different courses depending on the courses that we're talking about. And therefore, we want to see for a specific course, how much is that one going to cost? You realize that, for example, a certain course will require, say, probably 100,000. So we say that because these courses are taking 100,000 to train, can the government fund 80% of that 100 and let the universities fund the 20%? Okay. So when we say that the government is funding 40% of the differentiated unit cost, what you're saying is that the total cost that is required to train or to teach a certain course, the government is only paying 40% of that. And the university is now forced to generate their own income or to look for other sources of income to cater for the 60%. And what you're saying is that for now, the public universities are not able to do that.
Okay.
And that is where the genesis of the underfunding is coming from.
So in the 40%, this is the capitation that's coming directly from the government to the university.
Yes.
Where does the fee that the student is paying go? How much does it contribute?
Well, thank you. You realize that the fees that is being paid in public university, I think, is the lowest in the education sector. It is the same fees that have been paid over 20 years when some of us were still undergraduate students. And for one or two reasons, the government has not been able to increase that, although there's been proposals from the education sectors to increase that, that fees. So our students pay only 16,000 per year. And therefore, when you get that, that is where now we are saying that the university has to generate their own income. And therefore, the 60% now comes from the fees that students are paying. And because that is not enough, it's not able to cater for the 60%. In fact, the proposal has been that the government could allow the university to charge 48,000, which will, of course, will also be lower, but that will be at least fairer. So should the government
raise it from the current 16,000 to 48,000
yes,
as school fees per student
yes,
per year,
per academic year. And if the government allows that, then that could also be a way to increase the, to overcome these financial challenges. The public universities have two ways to raise finance. There's the government capitation that comes, and then there's the internally generated income. That is generated now from the school fees. Some of them have enterprises, some universities have hospitals, others have other, enterprises that generate funds. So the university will take what they have generated internally and what they're getting from the government so that they can meet their budgets.
Okay. Now, it seems as though, it doesn't seem, it's very clear that there is a heavy reliance on government intervention to run universities. They are public, we understand that, so that means obviously that there will be government participation and activity. However, the trend has been very clear. Just as you've said, even if you want to take the last 10 years, the trend has been clear that it is not enough to run the operations of public institutions. Why does it seem impossible for these internally generating activities to then increase in number and also increase in scope?
Well, I think the key challenge is, of course, we are calling them public. And because they are government institutions, whatever steps that they are taking must be regulated by the government. For example, you might find a university that has a very big land. And maybe they could also build hostels that they could also rent to students so that the students can pay money. But the private government partnership must be approved by the government. So if we are seated here, we are the manager of a university, and as the university management board, we make up a proposal that we need to set up a certain enterprise that is going to generate money. The same has to get approval from the government. And in many cases, this does not see the light of the day because of so many other things that are coming. Another issue is, of course, about the students, how much they are paying and all this. So most of these, in a way, must also be regulated by the government, which would be very different if you're talking about a private university, because we just decide to do something, and tomorrow it happens.
Implement it.
Yes. So some of them they are the challenges that they face in trying to approve this. I know of a certain university that had so many proposals and lies in the government for so many years before they approved, before they can come up with those enterprises or ways that they can generate their money. And I think another trend is that this government funding has been reduced almost every year. The government is reducing and reducing and reducing, but the universities are increasing day by day. So you find that the basket is increasing, but then the people that are feeding from the same basket are increasing day by day.
Okay, so please help us understand. So if a public institution today said that they had a new perspective on some internal generating activity, Ministry of Education obviously is the vanguard of public universities. So this project would have to go through the ministry and then would have to seek approvals, isn't it?
Yeah, sure.
So if, as those approvals are then sought, if it is a yes, you go. If it is a no, then you don't. Obviously, if it is a no, that means that you're left with the same basket of funding to do the many things that you would need to do. And obviously that means that there's then more reliance then again on said government to be able to get those funds that are needed. Now, today's world right now, the CS is saying we must have other activities upon that will bring in funds upon which you can rely. This government funding is just not going to cut it, right? So let's assume that in his statement, there is also the realization that these processes must pass through the same government, right? If that understanding is at the fore, today, would you say that public universities are then ready to bring, because maybe there have been many ideas, we can make money here, we can make money here. Would they be ready to bring these ideas before government today and say, this is what we would like to do, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, to increase the money in our basket to allow us to do the work that we need to do? Would universities be ready today to present those?
I will think that the answer to that will be yes. And I want to assure you, it's not that the public universities are just sitting there and watching as they sink into debt. Every university management has been sitting down and coming up with the proposals. What do we need to do? But again, as I say, when they come up with those proposals, there are those processes of approval that they must go through. For example, a good example is increasing the school fees that I were just discussing. So should that be allowed, then I can assure you that most of these challenges will not be there. But the government is not going to allow that.
Why?
Because it will also generate a lot of political heat. You know, that's not a statement that the political people are just going to take, for kindly, because then you can imagine, the pressure that is going to generate when you increase the school fees for the universities. And because of that, I can assure you, I think every year, every VC will sit with the members of the University Management Board. They will also bring in other stakeholders. They will come up with ideas. What do you want to do? But again, those ideas have to go through long processes in the government. I have a colleague and I have people that, for example, they attract research funds. But if, for example, as Dr. Motio attract and research funds, it will take a process before the government allows me to access that money. So even when we talk about attracting research fund, in fact, I had a colleague who just give up his money. You attract some research fund, but because of, the processes that are there, sometimes you give up and you say, wow, let it stay.
What's the process?
Well, of course, you have to submit those are the documents to the government through the VC. They also have to link with whoever is whoever is funding that project. What institution? Our EBAs on the other side also need to study a lot about that. So the governments must be very sure on who is funding that research, what is the interest and all that, and they also need to get the approval from that side. And I think sometimes these approvals are not very, very necessary. So even as we say that we can give, free hand to the universities to come up with ideas to generate money, still the government comes in to put a lot of, challenges that is not going to be as free as we may think.
Dr. Mutio, I want to ask you several things, but this matter that you raise is an important one. Are we saying that these public universities do not have a grants office or a structure and a system that actually has a way in which they manage grants that come into the country through the universities to fund projects within the country?
Well, those some universities might have, but I want to assure you it is not that easy. I have been involved in a partnership with a certain university in a certain country. And these universities was willing to partner with us and, to assist us in so many ways, to start programs, to do this, to bring infrastructure. But that did not see the light of the day. We had to give up.
Why?
Of course, as I say, because there are so many offices that must approve that.
So it's government bureaucracy?
Yes, if we may say.
So what discouraged you was the time it was going to take, not the fact that the government put a stop to it?
it may not just be about time, because some of the requirement that they put on the other side, then the other side may not understand what you people are talking about, because here they're just willing to partner with you. And when you put so many other, so many other requirements that they have to fulfill it, or that sometimes it's the other party may not understand, and therefore they end up giving up.
Are you outrightly saying, Dr. Mutio, that some of these requirements are unjustifiable, unrealistic, unreasonable?
Well, they might be reasonable and justifiable, but what I think is that they may not be necessary as such. There might be, there's a need to relook into the whole policy of how those things can be done.
The reason why I asked the question is because I am aware that there are research projects that involve partnerships that come to our universities. So if that happens, it means there is a way in which it can be done. What I'm asking is that, are you saying there is no way of easing this process? Because research grants are a very definitive way of ensuring that funds actually come to the university. But anyway, that aside, what percentage of the tuition fees that are paid by the students, the income that comes to university, what percentage of the tuition fees, what is the percentage of the tuition fees to the revenue of the university?
Well, I think that would be different from different universities, because some universities have more students than the other.
Okay. Let's talk about your university.
My university. I think, the percentage of that, or the income that could be generated through fees, I'm not very sure about the exact figure, but I can assure you that would be very little. Perhaps it would be 10% or even less of what would be required to meet the expenses.
I asked the question.
Yes.
You say the current fees that are paid by students per year, depending again on the course, is around, say, 16,000?
The 16,000 for the government does not now depend with the course. It cuts across.
Okay. Now, do you know what the fees for secondary schools is? If you're looking at the structure of the 2022-2023 year, per year for secondary schools, 22,000.
Correct.
For which secondary school? Sub-county, county, extra county?
So long as it's government, okay? But usually, I think you've asked a valid question. The national schools will charge more.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about an average where the Mwananchi goes. What do you call it?
Sub-county.
Yes, exactly.
Sub-county.
22,000.
Yes.
And most of these fees are paid by the parents. Those who get bursary are not the majority.
Sure.
Okay? Now, if it's a boarding school, it's 45,000. So what is being proposed, the 48,000, the point I'm trying to make is that it isn't that much higher.
Sure.
Okay?
Correct.
So when you say there is resistance, it's the same parents who had children in some of these schools and secondary schools, same parents who have children going to university. Why is 48,000 shillings a problem? And the children who are going to go to university are fewer than the ones we have in our secondary schools. Just by virtue of the numbers that we see passing, going to university.
Sure.
Yes.
Well, I think the question that you're asking is the same question that I've been asking, because we may not understand why we find that paying 48,000 in the university is going to be too high. But of course, one is that the government has been slow to approve that. Of course, one thing that you can be sure is that even if the fee was to be increased by 10 shillings, the students are coming out to resist that. That is going now to lead to perhaps closure of some universities. But it must be a bullet that we must be ready to.
I was going to ask the question, why not just close the university? Look, there is a practicality to this. It's not as though the fees is being increased because somebody wants to increase the fees.
Sure.
The fees is going to be, the moment you have a cost of living adjustment program, things go up, they don't go down.
Correct.
Okay? And the cost of living has gone up. So, by extension, it is the most logical thing. Now,
Sure.
I know we are undergoing some serious problems, but you see, that's a separate discussion.
Sure.
The need to raise fees is just one discussion. And the practicality of it, in my mind, is patently clear. Okay?
Sure.
Now, other avenues of ensuring that children go to university if they don't have the means exist in the country. Okay? But even this having been said, there is this other bullet that must be bitten. the management of the resources in our universities. You cannot tell me that this rampant problem we keep talking about is just because the government doesn't do this, the fees isn't enough. No. Is there a clear record of the jurisprudence that has been followed in managing the resources that the universities have in the best possible way? Can we look and say, this money, you can say what you like, but it has been managed well? Can you say that with great certainty?
Well, I think we have been having cases where the university management have had cases of mismanagement. We have cases in court. You are aware about that. And therefore, the issue of mismanagement, yes, we have some cases that have been there. But again, we cannot generalize and say that has been the real cause of the problem. But it could also be a factor in that, because then we've got cases where these resources have been clearly been mismanaged. Maybe you realize that in our country, the way the vice chancellors are appointed is also political. And therefore, in some cases where there is that mismanagement, the universities, may not come out very clear to fight this. But as a union, we have always been very clear on this to ensure that, the university resources are well managed. For example, a few years ago, and I think this is perhaps what has sadly brought these financial challenges, there was the issue of parallel students. Now, the parallel students, or what we call the Module 2, those are the students who got the minimum requirement of a C+, and they could not be admitted to the public universities through the government-sponsored students. So what they did is that they flocked the public universities, and they paid a lot of money from their own pockets to study in the universities. But then I think the challenge was that the government requires vice chancellors to declare how much of this money that was coming to the universities. And because, of course, it was a lot of money, some vice chancellors did not want to disclose. And I think that now began the friction between the government and the university management. Because then, as you say, then they had a lot of money, and perhaps much of it was not being managed properly. Now, you realize that a few years ago, I think it was during the reign of Matiang, the policies changed and some structures changed. So therefore, every single student who got C+ and above currently goes to university through the government-sponsored. And therefore, the universities no longer have the self-sponsored programs where students are coming to pay, their own fees. If that was the case, I can assure you now, universities could be having a lot of money. But now to disclose that and to manage that, perhaps that is another discussion.
So as I hear you, Dr. Mutio, you're saying a number of things. Number one is either the government considers increasing the amount of money per student that it's sending to the universities in the differentiated unit cost from 40% to anywhere closer to 100%. If not that, then the government should make it easier for universities to be able to do business that can generate money.
Sure.
And this doing business could be just from provision of hostel facilities, going into real estate. Like you said, that is a no-brainer. Universities, you have hostels, let the hostels be available, generate money from that, and others, and also make it easier for grants to come. Why would it be so difficult for the government to actually allow this to happen?
That's a discussion that we'll be picking up with the CAS, because as we said, we expect that he's going to bring on board all key stakeholders. As a union, we have a date with him. We will present all these proposals to him. I am very sure he will be, I know that he met the vice chancellors the other day. He will be meeting all key stakeholders, and he will collect all these proposals. And I think as he takes them to the executive, they might consider some of these options.
But at the same time, I've had to ask, we see universities owning prime piece of real estate, for example, in the CBD.
Yes.
Multi-story towers in Nairobi, in Kisumu, in Eldoret now, which are even having
even
problems.
Own hotels.
Own hotels,
Yes,
right?
yes, they do.
So that has already been allowed by the government.
Sure.
What's the problem?
Well, we don't say that government doesn't allow. What we see is the process. And sometimes they would allow, of course, sometimes they allow, not sometimes there's a way to, there are procedures to follow before that is done. That happened most likely, and I am sure what you're referring to, because I know the universities that is in your mind. That happened during the time that I was explaining, when universities were generating a lot of money through the self-sponsored programs, because the self-sponsored students were paying the fees that is charged in private universities. So you in my class, one is paying 16,000, the other one is paying over 100,000. So that was the time that now universities could generate a lot of money. That is when they even moved to CBD, so that they can compete for those students taking education to their doorsteps, so that now they can reach to the customers, that is the students. So they bought those buildings to, so that they could move closer. But currently now, I wonder if there's any universities that will be willing, that will be able to buy.
Even this piece of land that we are selling in Naserian Phase 3.
Yes.
They can't even afford 650k for 50 by 100.
And if you do that, even with the 20%, even with the 20 shillings off, I don't
They
know.
still can't.
Because you'll
Final
be surprised,
question.
sir, that if currently there's even universities that even paying 57% of their salaries. And I want to assure you, I don't think there's any employee in the country who is earning about 50% of their net salary. And that has been happening for years, just because they cannot pay 100% of their salaries.
Dr. Mutio, as we conclude the conversation, what next for UASU in terms of engagement with the new CS?
Well, we have a date with the CS. We'll be tabling our proposals, our demand. But key to our engagement is our 2017-2021 national CBA that has not been fully funded by the government. And we hope that the first place is that the government is going to fund our national CBA, because we are employees of the government. And when we negotiate our national CBA for our members, the expectation is that the government should fund that CBA. That has not been done, and the top on our discussion is that the government should start by funding our national CBA so that our members will begin to enjoy them.
Okay.
Wow.
So first agenda is tuongeze pesa. My goodness. Anyway, thank you very much. That's a job. That's a job of the union.
Sure, yeah.
Dr. Onesmus Mutio is the National Organizing Secretary of the Universities Academic Staff Union. He's been here with us. We'll be talking about funding universities, the cost of training people in our universities, especially public universities, whether we are paying directly from school fees or coming from government. Asante sana. We'll call you again, even after you've had a meeting with the CS, not to talk about your pay, but to talk about the universities and the challenges that they're facing.
And how we can overcome these challenges.
And how we can overcome the challenges, indeed.